Hi, Ernie.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, I think. I haven't seen Chris yet, but let's see. We got a minute and a half.
Did we have some papers that were associated with this meeting too?
We have a packet.
Do you remember what day you sent it on? I already looked at it, but I can't remember where I was just looking for it and couldn't
Well,
find it.
I mean, Pam sent the packet out, which has the thing I put in and something Chris put in and the two maps that I'd sent out before. So Pam sent it out on the 9th.
The night. Okay. I looked at it before, but I need to refresh my memory.
Mm-hmm. Here's Chris.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Chris.
How is
you doing?
all right? Am I starting this now? Did you start the recording or
The recording is on. Yep.
okay?
Sometimes it starts automatically and sometimes it doesn't. This time it did. So we are recording. You should have to say got it, I assume, too.
I hit, yep, I got it.
Yep. All right.
Okay. So the agenda, approval of the agenda. Any motions to approve the agenda as is or any changes?
I would move to approve the agenda as stated,
Second.
and that pretty much covers it
I'll say-
since you wrote it.
Okay, and then I think public, I did write public, I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
don't
you
have-
did. It's on the agenda. I have it up.
Okay, any public comments? No public comments?
Not on the agenda, yeah.
Okay, then correspondence. I mean, most of the correspondence relates to our topic matter, so we'll
Mhm.
just move on to our continuing discussions of scenic corridors, scenic.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I meant to, unfortunately, when I found that, I thought, Jan, that you had actually added that to the planning commission way back in the beginning. The community
Which one?
toolbox. The community
Oh,
toolbox.
yeah, I know. I probably came across it. I don't remember putting it in a packet. It's
Well-
definitely good information.
Oh, I thought it was fantastic information.
Yeah, I agree.
It was, but I didn't, I wanted everybody to know when you went to the link that if you keep drilling down, there are, it leads you to a lot of other things. And then when you go to the next thing, it leads you down to even more stuff. But the one that I didn't send, which I should, at least for our next meeting, it's called, I have it here, but I obviously can't introduce it in this group, but it's, if everybody goes to the link, I actually went to the VNR website, and it actually talks about how they went through the Charlotte experience. And sort of my takeaway from all of this is not only it was a great idea, and I'm assuming I didn't actually look. It sounds like the alliance was actually created by VNR. I'm not quite sure.
So say that a little more. What alliance and
So if you look at the Charlotte as a case study,
yep.
they wanted to get the overlay districts, but they really, it's kind of like us. They want to know exactly. I mean, we know that there's already been a committee 10 years ago that went around and picked roads, picked scenic vistas or whatever they thought was a community resource. And that's exactly what these guys did. But if you look at the Charlotte case study, I think the Alliance, it's called the, shoot, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. It's called the Champlain, okay, it's called the Champlain Valley Greenbelt Alliance, is a nonprofit organization, was formed to create green belts along major road corridors in Vermont. And their emphasis is generally on the western side of Vermont. But the one page which I didn't send you is really interesting, is how they went about doing it, which was really great. And my takeaway was that they really emphasize community support, getting groups involved, planning commission, select board, all your committees, your historic preservation, all the kind of groups that you have in your community. And when you look at their first trip that they took, was they didn't look at maps. They actually all got in a car. They got in a van, and they picked, obviously they picked however many people wanted to do it. And they just drove around and just talked about it. And I think it would have been really fascinating. I mean, Norwich is obviously just a smaller, focus group, but they were looking at a much bigger territory. But it was really, I thought it's funny how sometimes I think groups like us have a really tough time as to how to actualize getting something like this on paper besides what's already been written. And these guys, their approach was get in a car and drive around, have a cup of coffee, and just talk. And I just thought that was a really great idea. What are the scenic?
Oh, it has OML repercussions.
What?
It sounds like it might have somebody might find a way to have OML repercussions.
A warned meeting in a van.
That's so true.
I mean, what would think about it. If the three of us went around in a car and looked at stuff and discussed it between the three of us, how would that go over?
So no, wait a minute, Ernie. Wait a minute. This is what my next point of the subject was, is that to contact the Alliance and ask them how they did all that. They only really briefly described how they did it, but they said, that driving around in the van was a great first thing. And I don't think, they didn't say, and I didn't reach out to them. I'm only going off of what I read, that it didn't include the planning commission. It was, they had picked, the Alliance is a nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
I think through a grant, worked with these guys. So I think, Norwich, I don't know if the Alliance has decided to go out of the Western Vermont corridor, and if they're doing it all over the state. VNR would be a great group to call and say, is there another group that is considering doing something like this? Yeah. Somebody obviously created a nonprofit group to go out there and find. The state, especially through VNR, is trying to really put some emphasis on saving important scenic resources in Vermont. That's it. That there's clearly an emphasis on that. So I don't think that I think it was the members of the Alliance, and then they took members of the community with them. I don't think it was a planning commission thing at all.
Right.
But that's
you could do it that way. You could have some ad hoc group or a separate non-town body having it. But it's worth being specific here, kind of what we're talking about. And I think specifically what we're saying is we have scenic and ridgeline as the topics, right, as it relates to solar sighting, since that's us as the subcommittee. But very specifically, I think what we're saying is we have a scenic resource inventory that is 23 years old.
Right.
And so we're saying, how should we update that? That's really the item on the table, that this is the Charlotte one and the VNRC is helping suggest how to do that.
The way we did the original one of those inventories in the early 90s, or maybe even late 80s. I can't remember when I was doing it. It was the first thing I did when I first volunteer effort I made in the town. Was the natural resources inventory, which included scenic and agricultural and vernal pools, and you name it. Almost anything that was sort of a land formation was looked at. And different people, there was sort of different parts of this committee that did the inventory, but we may want to think about setting up a group that does the inventory and look for town volunteers and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, certainly it would be.
It was a big,
It'd be
huge job.
easy. Yeah, and it would make sense. Obviously, the Conservation Commission,
Yeah.
the Trails Committee, they're going to be historic preservation. They're going to be, if we said there are good planning reasons to do this, who else is interested in being involved? I think we'd get quite a few hands to go up just within the town groups, not even counting.
I mean, I know that whichever one I was on, because we also at the time, what's her name? She was a tall woman. Both she and her husband were very tall. And she played guitar. I haven't seen them for a long time in town. But they were
doing the previous inventory.
Are you talking about?
They did this, and they taught us. She was the one who taught us, for instance, how to use mapping equipment, because it was all manual at the time, and we actually did mapping on Mylars on all of this. That's how deep into it we were. And then these maps were used as the overlays, the first set of overlays the town used in planning. And all I'm trying to say here is that this is something, it's a big effort, but it's something that this town has accomplished in the past on its own. I think her name was Martha. But in any case, whoever was actually running it, I don't actually realize, it's so long ago and I was so new to the town, didn't know names or anything like that. But it was a huge effort, and it lasted well over a year. I mean, maybe it lasted 2 years. And it was, like I said, it was done by hand. Nowadays we would have computerization and stuff like that. The big trick we now have to face is how many people could we get to volunteer to help? Because this, I said, one group I was on alone was 10 people, maybe not quite 10, but it was a large group that filled the upstairs, which is now what is now Brennan's office. Would fill that.
So can we, to move it forward, the simple thing would be that the solar siting subcommittee, as part of looking at what it's doing to prioritize solar siting topics, sees the need to update. We need an updated scenic resource inventory as part of what we need, that we would just feed that to the planning commission.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Commission, and say, we recommend kicking off and asking, basically putting it on the table and asking for volunteers and pulling it together.
Yep.
The full planning commission. And we can say that we're going to do that, and then sort of park that as an action item. And this group isn't going to solve it or do it.
But that's what I'm getting at is that we bring this to the planning commission as a whole. And the other part we have to think about is that this also feeds into all our regulations, these maps also. So it makes total sense for us to start this sooner rather than later. And get it running.
It's referenced in the bylaws. It quotes the 2000 scenic inventory in the scenic section of the bylaws. And so the thing that's quoted in the current zoning regs is 23 years old. So that needs updating.
So
and next meeting, we should this should be put on, I guess, our even though we're discussing it here because we need a piece of it here. So it's reasonable for us to talk about this, but we can also suggest that on our next meeting, this is be brought up as at the planning commission meeting, at the next planning commission
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah, I think we should ask to have it on the agenda.
Because I think this may be
So-
more.
Before, I almost think before we, I'd like again to do a little bit more homework because, okay, a couple of things, I'm gonna try and tie them all together. When we were doing Upper Loveland, we knew that the Queechee test is becoming a more and more, we're talking as far as solar siting.
Mhm.
We knew that the Queechee test is becoming more and more important. So, and this was what, when I was reading how this group was doing their overlay districts and their mapping, they were very specific on their criteria of what they were looking for.
Wait,
And, you know, they were
sorry, Chris, this group, which group?
Well, again, I'm going back to the Charlotte and the Alliance.
Okay,
And so they only had, you know, most of the stuff I sent you guys, except for the one Charlotte case study, most of them was just talking about, you know, the whole idea of how to approach this. With those case studies, it was a slightly more specific, but they're still missing a lot of detail. Like, how do you, okay, I know I probably shouldn't use Jay Van Armen's spot as an example. I'm trying to think of something that's less, I mean, it's just, it's, to me, it's like one of the most spectacular views in Norwich. It's so beautiful. So forgive me, Jay, if I hope but it'd be, when you go into actualizing something, they explained how the group went around and said, you know, they're experiencing more sprawl than we are on the western side of Vermont, especially along Route 7. And
Yeah.
that's why I think they really focused on that. Route 5, fortunately, is not experiencing that kind of sprawl yet, but who knows? So again, we got to put it back down to a sort of on a Norwich level. What I didn't get from this, from what I read from them, is the Alliance helped them, excuse me, create the inventory and came up with the criteria of what made something worth protecting.
Mhm.
And then they said they had to identify it, create boundaries. And then they also said, you know, they have I love how each one of, at the end of each one of these things, they have something they refer to as lessons learned. And in all of them, it says community support is number one. Neighbor, you know, talking to the neighbors is number two, because all of this doesn't help if your neighbors are, you know, you're not gonna have the neighborhood support. So community outreach was obviously a big part of it. But they didn't really quite go into how they actualized. Like I'm going to use Jay for an example. Let's just say we say that's a beautiful property. Well, I don't think we can just suddenly just, you know, put it in an ridgeline overlay and say, yeah, well, they can't do anything. So that's why I wanted to talk to these guys and say, okay, so how do you turn, you know, the concept of a ridgeline protection into actual regulation without without overreaching. So it seems like this is what I wanted to talk
I mean, we have the hooks. That's why this is somewhat simplified in terms of how we do it. There are hooks in the current bylaws, and it's not, in this case, it's not the ridgeline one, it's the scenic one. And there's scenic areas, it's section 3.1 or something. I was looking at it earlier.
Right.
And it says, you know, and it smells like a Queechee test because it says shall not cause undue adverse impact
Exactly.
on resource places that are identified on this specific inventory. And so that part is already in there. And then the inventory, if you look in detail at the one they did in 2000, it has a whole scoring point system. if it can be seen from a major road, you know, a
Right.
class 3 road instead of a class 4 road, if it, that even just like the amount of traffic on the road elevates the weight. So there are 4 or 5 criteria that they weight, and then they say, okay, these were the tier 1s that had above a score of thus and such.
Right.
And so that's the mechanism. We may want to look at the bylaws and clarify the hook that's in the bylaws, but clearly it already calls out an inventory, scenic resources, not to have an undue adverse effect on these. And
Yeah, but remember the Creechy test.
the DRB uses that.
Yeah, but the problem is Norwich didn't pass the Creechy test. We weren't specific enough. So,
Wait, well, so wait, you're talking about Loveland.
well, not just, yeah, Loveland wasn't on the list, but it was still in the ridge line.
So what do you mean we didn't pass the Queechy test?
So there were several, I forgot what the reference was, but it made it very clear. Well, it's not, Norwich, I don't remember. Oh God, Jan, you're asking me to go back to that whole, all those briefs, and there are too many. For me to recall.
But I think I hear what you're saying, because the statement
just say
clearly, clear community standard really needs to be very clear.
Specific.
It is J. Van Orman's farm or something very
Yes,
specific.
it can't just be-
even as seen from this angle.
Okay.
But that's how specific it is in the inventory now. There are specific views and farms and cemeteries and roads that were called out on that inventory. So
okay, well, here's an example. So they just recently, again, I don't know the dates, but 100B is obviously a very historic road and a historic road in Vermont.
Yeah.
And through the VNR and the Alliance, and again, they didn't go into too much description. They've now called that a byway, and it's a protected road.
Mhm.
So it's going to be very hard for anybody to do any kind of development on that road. So that's another option. Union Village, my understanding is Union Village is a protected road, but there's a solar park that I can see coming down Union Village Road. So I'm not quite sure how that got through, but nonetheless, it did. So I'm not quite sure, again, what I mean, it's just one of my examples.
Yeah.
I
No, that's a good specific question. That is, how do we make our scenic inventory have the clout of a clear written community standard?
exactly.
Then that cascades to the bylaws, that cascade to the DRB, and so it actually has that weight. And scenic, I don't know, it's another question relative to enhanced energy plans, whether how much clout you can have without an enhanced energy when you're getting due consideration instead of substantial deference or whatever those are.
Right.
But I think that specific question of how do you make it so that your scenic inventory has teeth,
Right.
and can actually, the DRB can make a decision, point to that inventory, and have something to stand on.
Linda. Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, thank you very much. I wanted to refer you and quote a little something from, I think it's a resource that I sent you all before, and it is on the Public Service Department website. It's Guidance for Municipal Enhanced Energy Planning Standards.
Yeah.
So this seems relevant to your current discussion. So it says municipalities may add locally designated resources or critical resources to the known and possible constraint layers in the mapping standards of doing enhanced energy plans. These will ultimately flow through to the primary and secondary resource potential maps, can have the effect of designating areas as possibly or likely unsuitable for renewable energy development. However, if the constraints would have the effect of preventing the state, region, or town from reaching its selected targets for renewable energy generation, that is, the plan will not meet this standard. So a municipality may restrict development in certain areas, but there must be sufficient land left in the preferred and potentially suitable areas to meet selected targets. So again, and the targets, I want to remind you, because I think I brought this up before, that based on statewide, calculations about renewable energy goals, and it's based on population, like every town actually has a kind of target for siting renewable energy projects within its town boundaries and meeting certain goals. And so this is part of the enhanced energy planning process, that you can have criteria by which you want to restrict development, but you cannot have so much restrictions that you cannot meet your renewable energy generation target. So I just want to remind you guys of that.
I think, Linda, it's a good point. I think the one thing that I think we've had a discussion earlier, but haven't brought this up. There are two sides of the coin of this, of locating scenic, and then again, what I'm getting from the PUC is that they're starting to say we are really encouraging people now to find locations, not the whole town, that start identifying. So while people are out identifying places that they don't want to touch because they're valuable to the town, they're saying while they're driving around finding these sites, they can also be looking for sites that would be suitable for solar. So it's not an exclusionary trip. I think it's a combination. But what they're trying to do is say, find the sites that you really want to protect. At the same time, find the brown sites, find the rooftop, find the parking lots. For example, I mean, the funny thing about Norwich is that, all we've got is Route 5. Any development along Route 5 is Route 5 South. I can't think of a whole lot of industries unless L&M wants us to, would let us plant something in their parking lot, but I doubt it. King Arthur, we could approach King Arthur and ask them if they're willing to put solar up there and again, it's really funny. When I was reading this whole thing about how the alliance worked, it literally was having people in your community drive around and come up with these ideas. It wasn't that there was some magical, person that says, well, that's appropriate and that's not appropriate. It's literally people in the town coming together and saying, okay, just coming up with ideas. Has anybody decided to approach Dresden School District or Fogs or, areas along there that might be suitable, or Britain's now, along there, it's rooftop mounting. They work. The whole idea is that identifying sites that shouldn't be, as well as sites that should be. So,
right. That just go ahead, Ernie?
Well, I was just going to say this all sort of just compounds, call for, resources inventory. I mean, it goes right to it's the exact same process of doing that, and it's another overlay that we would develop in conjunction with everything else. And I think again that's why we should probably, that it's a really good idea to have this overlay ready as well. And this is a new one, actually.
Is it necessary? I just wanted to separate the two things if we could to simplify. Is it necessary to be working on an enhanced energy plan to have value to the scenic inventory and the kind of the mapping of constraints and the mapping of this weighting between push these sites as better for solar and these sites for as worse? Is that still a perfectly valid and good exercise even on a regular energy plan, and you just get more clout with it on an enhanced? Then we could kind of separate the enhanced energy plan, should we do it, won't we, from the other thing.
Have you talked to
No.
Peter Gregory?
I talked to Peter Gregory about enhanced energy plan, and he said a number of our neighbors, including Thetford, Stratford, and so forth, have them. And he said, quote, it's not a big lift. They have a form for you to fill out, and many of our neighbors have done it. So that was what Peter said about it.
Right.
But that clearly is one of the exercises, is, to Linda's point, and the thing I sent out, the thing I put in the packet about just specifically screening, can a municipality adopt bylaws that screen, that put limits or say where you can put ground mount? And the answer is yes, as long as you don't effectively prohibit. You can't put such onerous screening regulations in place that it makes it impossible to find anywhere for solar. And to Linda's point, it's specific to a goal of a certain number of megawatts of generation. But it's, that exercise, you have to do both. So clearly, I think we can just say, let's go to the full PC, and you're right, Chris, let's get it so that we have a decent plan or a proposal. But the point is, start the ball rolling on updating a scenic resource inventory that's as clear and written and scored and understood as possible. And then that's kind of half the equation, because the other side of the equation is
if it's not there, it's suitable.
Finding the places that are, where are you pushing it to?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing of why I think it should be coordinated with the rest of the inventorying, because let's say it just, and this is really kind of impossible, but it's conceivable that one thing could conflict with the other so bad that scenic resources might not include wetlands, and I'm trying to think of how
it wouldn't.
But we don't have to worry about wetlands anyway, Ernie. I mean,
no, I'm not.
A&R does that.
A&R.
But if you did historic, I mean, you can definitely say, are there, it's a mapping exercise. It's a redoing of the overlay districts, right? I mean, that's the thing that you put out, Chris, is all about overlays. And so we're talking about redoing the overlays to be up to date and accurate and well defined. And I really liked, and we'd have to dig into the two maps that Pam found, and one of them, which was the Ridgeline map, but color weighted by where you could see it from, or by how many places you could see it from.
Right.
And so you would, if you did a more broad method of that, you would clearly have, it's a weighting thing. So you would have, Van Orman's farm there would be a really bright color because of just the number of people that drive by it, the weight that it got in an inventory.
Well, so what I was trying to say, though, and this is why I was really hoping that either you or me or Ernie, whoever's interested, can talk to the Alliance, and when they were going, I think they addressed specific roads that they knew were going to be addressed. So the overlay wasn't necessarily so important about looking at ridge lines along Union Village Road. To me, I think Union Village Road, Main Street and Union Village Road is a pretty fundamental road in the town. It's probably one of the most scenic roads we have. And it's probably the most traversed because it goes from here to Thetford, going up to 132. I'm not, and again, there are countless dirt roads that I think would be included in this as well. But
I'm thinking Bragg Hill, right?
well,
Bragg-
yeah, but what I was saying about
Bradley Hill.
yeah, but what I'm saying about something like Union Village Road is that, you know, there could be something much more state acknowledged, like they did with 100B, and say it is now a byway, and it becomes more bike friendly. I mean, and it's not just about it's about the preserving that particular road in a lot of ways, that it becomes more bike friendly. I'm sorry I didn't include it in all my stuff that I sent out to you guys. But it would be helpful if you look at it and see now, if you look at what 100B means to the state of Vermont, it is a state protected highway, period.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's kind of like
If the state has a mechanism, Jack Camden said something very useful when we were meeting. And he said, people don't understand, and he had some historical background about the Vermont Constitution and the Philadelphia type Constitution. But the point was, a town can do something when the state gives them permission to.
right,
But that's the point. So if you're saying, so enhanced energy plans.
That's called being a Dillon state versus a home rule state.
Right, right.
True enough, Bernie.
And so that's good to understand. Don't waste your time trying to do something that it will have no clout because you haven't been given permission to do it. But when you have an example from Charlotte and you have an example of enhanced energy plans, then that means that it's past that first hurdle, that the municipality has the ability to do this.
Yeah.
And so you say, okay, what is a state, to your point, if the municipality can petition to have the state, because Route 5 is a state.
Route 5, well, that's why my point was, it wasn't just Union Village, I think is very specific to Norwich, but in the same, when I saw what they were doing to the Route 7 corridor, because Route 7 is just getting decimated from, you know, strip malls and crap that's going up there, and they're really concerned about it. So that's why they developed this. So to me, Route 5, you know, I know that when they were talking about that the transportation agency of transportation was all bent out of shape about the study about turning Route 5 into that corridor. That's exactly what they're talking about.
Bike corridor, yeah.
Bike corridor, and that's the same thing what they did with Route 100B. You know, they want to turn it into a state designated road where they'll have signage, they'll have a lot of other things that say, this is a state protected road. No more strip development, no more nothing. It is going to be bike friendly, visitor friendly, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so,
I think so we have Route 5, we have 132 there, so we can take
132 would be another good one.
Take a category of roads that are state roads and see what the options are, because you'll have different options for state roads than you would for Union Village and Bradley. But then what are the options for those to say, okay, now we have a class 3 road or whatever Union Village and then Beaver Meadow, and what are the tools that we have for those? And it'll be different than the state highways, but you'll have some that clearly we can put it on our scenic inventory. What else do we have for tools?
Well, so, and this was another question that I wanted to ask them. So here is a very interesting point, and I think we've talked about it before. So I'm not sure Upper Loveland applies in this way, but they were driving along, but there was concern that there was some sites that were you couldn't see from the road, but they knew that they were going to protect. So that's another really interesting thing to me. It's kind of like, when you're on Potrel Hill Road, you can't really see the ridge line because you're kind of driving through it. But I can see all of Potrel, all the ridge line from Waterman Hill. So the strange effect is, you know, I'm not quite sure how it passed, but there's a house on Bradley that's right on the ridge line of Bradley Potrel
Yeah.
ridge line. I'm not sure how that one passed. It's in the ridge line. That was back in the day with Phil. I don't know
That
if
was,
they've got
I
a
believe that's Morgan Goodrich's.
no. It's
Not
it
that
was
one?
a couple. It was a couple from Tuck, and
Hmm.
it's it's way out Bradley Hill and down. You know,
Okay,
along
farther,
that
yeah,
way.
yeah.
But anyway, and again, maybe it passed the muster of it was in the ridge line, but you couldn't see it from Bradley Hill because, of course, you can't see it from Bradley Hill. It is Bradley Hill. But that's what.
So
that
I
was-
think it gets to the same question or the same requirement is your scenic inventories and your ridge line have to be as well defined as possible.
right.
And it's where you can see how many places you can see it from,
Right.
how, and it's sort of the subjective piece, how important, how scenic is it?
Right.
And that's
Now,
all
I've-
part of the waiting.
You just brought up something too, by the way, because I've been wondering for a long time. How does Route 91 and 89, if there's really enough of it in Norwich to consider, how do places like that sort of affect both ridgeline and scenic resources? I mean, in both cases,
That-
the case of any
91
highway-
was clearly mentioned in the Upper Loveland conversation all the
I
time.
know, and I'm not.
But I mean, the difference, the reason I'm picking on the highways is because highways are industrial installations. They are not. There's nothing scenic about a highway itself. I mean, we should be putting, and I'm not gonna focus on this. I'm just saying, but an absolutely perfect place for solar panels is along every single median strip and in certain places along the sides. And
Agreed.
it's nonsense that there's no one mentioning that, but I don't want to dwell on that. The point is what I'm concerned about is, those things take up huge swaths and basically are blights on huge swaths of the land. And yet, are we supposed to protect the views, the scenicness and all that sort of stuff for those monstrosities? Well, some people are going to say yes, and I'll put money on it's going to be the state that's going to say
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But no one's talking about it right now, so it's something that's going to have to be raised because, for instance, Norwich and a lot of rural towns, there's if they were to buy into putting solar panels on the medians, there would be an enormous installed base of solar panels for the state of Vermont. It'd be huge. It'd probably be bigger than all the little things that are going to be plopped all over people's, figuring out which, and it'd be easier to figure out that you're going to put it there. We probably wouldn't have half the planning, the permitting kinds of issues and stuff like that. Because here, every single thing we're talking about here is pretty much a complication for installing a solar system. And in my family right now in Massachusetts, we donated a sizable portion of land. We had, and what it took was we had to donate half of the land as a conservation, so that the other half of the land, which couldn't be used, which was developable, the half of the land was wetland, but it was beautiful wetland. The other half was pretty ugly, so it was developable. It was kind of something of a little bit of a brown field. So that's being turned into a a large solar farm. But the thing is that it's taking just even an experienced company, it's called Borrego, 2 years so far, and maybe 3. I can't remember when my brother died because it started when so it's 2020. 2020, they started the process of getting the permits. They're still trying to finish getting permits from the town and stuff like that, because it's a town a lot like Norwich. It's actually a relatively rural but suburban kind of town. It's so I'm just looking at right now the kind of the complexities that we're already talking about. We're talking about just two overlays, and they're already, every layer of I'm going to call it every single overlay, every single set of conditions and terms and so on we put on this make it that much more complicated to install to put the installations in. And on top of it all, from my point of view, it also is going to trigger more pushback and kickback from industry and from people that want to see them, or don't want to see them. I can see battles. Whereas, the more streamlined we can make this and simple we can make it, the easier it's going to be we should try to be looking to make this as easy as possible to find the right places and to eliminate the wrong places. And we've already had almost an hour of discussion on this process. And I'm not complaining about that, by the way. That's not a complaint. But it's just kind of gives you an idea that we're just at the very, very tiny tiptoeing through the doorway with this issue right at the moment. I mean, we haven't really got into it yet. And I just think we got to keep all of that big glom of stuff in our minds as we talk about all this too, because we're both protecting stuff and going to impede stuff at the same time. And, as a lawyer, I just keep on thinking, okay, I can hear a whole pile of people getting angry.
Bob?
Yeah, I was curious. You can hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I was curious as to if any of the regulations or individuals' perceptions define who the audience is for scenic views. So, for instance, there's clearly people who live in the town and who see their environment. But in reference to, for instance, interstates, the people who drive up and down these interstates, including town residents, including Vermonters, they're very much impacted by the views that they're looking at. And so, filling up the median is less of an issue, although reflections could be something. But that corridor in the area to the sides of the interstate certainly can impact the scenic views enjoyed by visitors to the state and people commuting from one town to another in the state in a deleterious way. One of our economy's greatest draws for bringing people in from New England to spend money and create sales tax revenue and so on is the advertising that driving up and down 91 or 89 is for the state. So it's like, okay, well, are we giving greater weight to the scenic appreciation of people who live in the area, or do you give equal weight to anybody who might be driving on or biking on a road?
Well, that's one of the battles that I'm foreseeing. When when that's thrown into the mix, I'm thinking there's another battle right there. I mean, some people like me think that they're blights. The highway is a blight. I'll never get past that. I will always think the highway is a blight. But other people think they're wonderful. And no one's going to change their mind.
This is why, again, when we go back to the Creechy test and the PUC having to listen to all the testimony of people, what is considered the average person. And Bob, that addresses your question. The state has basically, if you Google in Vermont, because the Creechy test goes as it follows its line of reasoning, what is undue adverse according to the average person. And I don't think we put a listserv post out and say could all the average people of Norwich, or do you want to drive around and pick out scenic resources? And I
Maybe
think
we
there's some
should.
people that have some great deal of consternation with the state that they actually came up with that ridiculous definition. What is the average person? I'm a Vermonter, as far as I'm concerned. It's called the Green Mountain State for a reason. And I'd be obvious that I happen to think Green Mountains are pretty spectacular. But there are other people who would say, no, I want to see windmills up there because it's futuristic. So we would tie ourselves to the ground if we were constantly trying to say, what is the average person? And what is the average person's sensibility? To Ernie's point, I get it, but we can't keep hog tying ourselves because we're worried about litigation or whatever. And that's why I said, I would prefer to actually talk to the Alliance and people who have done this.
Yeah.
And they've reached those hurdles. They've done it. So Charlotte did it. They're all along 100B. They've done it. So they have passed a test that has said, you know what, we didn't violate the OML where we were driving around in a minivan because they allowed us to do this. They picked out certain properties, they identified it. They created an inventory, and it's a case study as opposed to just making this up. Based on
it sounds like, Chris, you were asking which of the three of us might be the most interested and passionate to talk to these people. I think you've signed yourself up pretty important.
Well done, Jan. That was perfect.
Thanks,
But I mean,
Don.
I totally agree with you, and obviously we're
I
right
vote.
behind
I vote for.
Wait, you guys. Can I? What I want them to do is invite somebody from the Alliance to actually come to one of our to.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's VNRC.
And because I don't really like talking to them and then I have to write it down and say what they talk. I would rather in this particular case.
That's what the recording function on your phone is for.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
I'd still want to just
the,
send them an email and or something and say, listen, we're going through this procedure right now. You guys are obviously, not only have you done it, you've implemented it. So, would you be
the first question is there any group on the east side of the state that is working on it or has done it? Because there may be. VNRC is clearly.
I was going to ask them that very question. And the Alliance isn't just for Western United States. And I have a feeling, because this was a group, a nonprofit that was formed, I would be very surprised if they don't splinter off and create an Eastern side. But we're not having the same sprawl. I don't think we're having, because we're so close to the New Hampshire border, we're not getting the sprawl effects on Route 5. They're getting the sprawl effects because New York doesn't offer the no tax benefit of jumping ship and, go buy all your beer next door.
Right. West
So they're getting sprawl. So I think we lucked out in that particular way, but they still, I just wanted to be able to put a call into these guys and say, can you just give me a little bit? They're really only giving us a basic outline of what they've done. And I just thought it would be really nice. Yeah. And the Alliance, again, is a nonprofit, and it could be something that, they would be willing to, whether if we could get a grant or find out what they charge, just come in and consult with us for that reason.
And obviously, if we were going to do that, then we could call up Thetford and Stratford and
absolutely
and say, hey, anybody interested?
Yeah, 132.
So you could clearly connect that up.
But I also think that you guys your group that's doing the Route 5 thing. I would think that the Alliance is that's the kind of people you want to talk to because they've already done it.
I would think that they would be involved, or someone who is involved in promoting the bikeway is going to obviously have the same sensibilities and is going to, you want to get these alliances. That's why they call it that. You want to get these alliances of the bike riders and the scenic folks and so forth together.
Yeah, but they're giving it to John. If I got it, I'm not mistaken. they're not making, they're letting each town make a decision first. I don't know if they're doing a whole thing.
They're really initially, they're pulsing the towns up and down to gauge interest.
Right.
They're not separating the towns out. They're just going all the way up the road and saying, are you interested? I think this is a good idea. And then some specifics about the road in your area. Are there particularly dangerous spots? Are there particularly scenic spots?
Right.
And so it's that early, but I'm just saying that effort will pull out interested parties. That one subset of people on one road will be talking about some of the same things we're talking about. And to get to your point, though, I wanted to respond to the sort of level of agreement, or what is it that you can find agreement on. And some people like the looks of solar panels or windmills, and some people don't, and so forth. And yeah, there's a chunk of stuff that is the subjective perception is there's a lot of disagreement on. But at the same time, when you say Van Ormon's farm is gorgeous, it's clearly right at the top of the scenic resource inventory from 23 years ago. So there's more agreement than not. If you just look and say, okay, what are the 5 greatest scenic resources in Norwich? I think you'd get more agreement on that than you think. If you said, do you like the look of that panel that's at the end of, up by the Meeting House Cemetery, do you like the looks of that thing? You'd get disagreement. But there's quite a bit of agreement on some of the basics of scenic.
Yeah, Steve? Yeah, I think you're on mute.
How about this?
There you go.
Better? Okay, great. Hey, thanks for having me, and great conversation. I'm just hearing the same thing over and over again, and I just hope maybe you can clarify this, or at least understand how those of us in the public are hearing it, because all I'm hearing about is we have to protect the places where the wealthy people live, up on the ridgelines, the big properties, who, people who have these wonderful views, and we have views of their pastures and their ridgelines and their beautiful bucolic farms. But what about the people who live in places that don't, meet that criteria?
That's a great question.
Roads? What about people who live in places that aren't necessarily considered to be, worthy of being on the cover of Yankee Magazine or Vermont Life?
I think that's a great idea, Steve. And I think that's what I was at. That was one of my original questions, is that, to me, all of Vermont is scenic.
I agree with you 100%. And what I'm hearing again and again and again is that we're going to make a list of sacrifice zones in Norwich. And I would defy anybody here to say to anyone in this room or anybody in this town, you live in a sacrifice zone because your property just isn't that, it's just not that attractive.
I think it's an excellent point.
I think we really need to think about this, and I think you need to think about it really hard and clear, because that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that there are places that are worthy of just being kicked to the curb.
Go ahead, Ernie.
That's what I have to say. I'm going to just go back to mute. And
I think it's a great point.
Steve, I'm really glad that you brought that up. That is an incredibly important question. And I'm trying to think now. Well, I was talking about how we have these inventories, and we had people working on them, doing the mapping out and all that sort of stuff. But what I actually don't recall, now that I'm thinking about it, is how did we know something was scenic or something like that? There was something. Some of the maps are fairly objective, but that's an incredibly subjective one, as is, for instance, anything related to historic issues. And how, actually, how do you deal with that? And I'm kind of at a loss, because the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is, unless there is some legal standards set somewhere, you know, that is not rely at the bottom on a subjective decision by somebody. You know, how would we actually figure out what is a scenic? I mean, as you said, everything's scenic, and that's not an unreasonable. That's not a unreasonable statement. Actually, it doesn't matter. I mean, there is no such thing really as a sacrificial place. You know, you can't
or an ugly place in nature. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go out where
I mean, and
humans make things ugly,
yeah, and
nature's-
hence my
Oh
attitude.
my God.
By the way, but the point is that what Steve is saying is right, and actually, as I'm trying to think back when I was doing those inventories way back when, I'm not sure what actually established the criteria of stuff. Certain wetlands was relatively straightforward. That's a relatively objective.
Already, Jan just told you. You looked at Jan went through how they listed the criteria 1 through 5. So they did have criteria, and that's why I said I wanted to talk to the Alliance and why they drove around and they had a list of questions. And that's why I want them to join the meeting, because they had a list of questions that they went down and said, okay, what makes this particular view relevant but they didn't list. I wanted them to show examples of what were the
so
questions.
they'll I mean, I think we could find examples of things that are specific, but you'll be dancing around subjectivity at some point. I mean, you can do quantitative things about how many people a day or a week see it versus, you know, one person sees it or 1,000 people see it.
Right.
So there's that element, but then there's also there are usually words about consistency or harmony with existing, you know, so it doesn't, you know, but so you stick a modern house in the middle of historic houses, right? So there's a consistency argument, and then at some point you get to pure subjective.
I know it when I see it.
I like that, you don't like that, you know, you call that beautiful, I think it's you know, but there's a lot of stuff you can quantify, and then you gotta be careful with the pure subjective. But
And that's what they were trying to say about Vermont, is that there are certain resources that need protecting, that the average person is going to say, yeah, what is it? Camel's hump?
Camel's hump.
Camel's hump. It's going to be protected. They're not going to touch it.
Linda's had her hand up.
Hi, thank you. And I just wanted to add to your discussion that as you talk about and think about trying to identify certain areas that you would not like to see development on, and again, I'm going to be reading from that guidance for municipalities on enhanced energy planning, but it says, when municipalities designate areas as unsuitable for certain types and scales of renewable energy generation, having clear policies becomes particularly important. Municipalities must treat renewable energy generation facilities in a similar manner to other types and scales of development. And meaning if you want to end up identifying scenic areas and saying, these areas in Norwich are unsuitable for solar development, that means you're also saying they're unsuitable for housing, you know, so you can't, it says, it says, for example, if a plan designated certain land as unsuitable for all development because it is above 1,700 feet and within priority forest blocks, then it would be acceptable to designate that as unsuitable for a type and or scale of renewable energy technology. So I just want to highlight to you that this discussion about areas suitable or not, you cannot target renewable energy generation as what's unsuitable.
Well, Linda, I'm glad you brought it up that way, because I was going to address Steve's point. So why we are going after the ridge line, Steve, is because there's already an overlay. It exists, and so we're trying to, but we've discovered it's out of date. It doesn't have any, seems to have any kind of adoption day. And the scenic roads inventory also doesn't seem to have an official adoptive date. So that's why what Jan has been sort of saying, that it's out of date and it needs to be updated. So I totally agree, Steve, with what your point that it's not just the ridgeline protection that we're only going after. That just happens to be the only thing that the town of Norwich has.
Well, I think scenic is a biggie. I mean, scenic, and if you just look through the scenic inventory that is currently active, the one from 2000,
right,
it talks about, little cemeteries at the back end of Norwich, and this dirt road that connects up to these dirt roads in the back. It's not just the ridge tops and the big roads. So scenic can be more, obviously ridgeline is a specific geographic feature. Scenic resources can be what what the town chooses to define them as an overlay, and we're kind of and I'm just looking at the one you have in Charlotte open here in the packet, and it comes under the heading tools you can use, scenic overlay district. So the town has tools it can use, and these overlays are one of those tools. Ridgeline is specific.
Happens to be one.
Wetlands, they're historic, village, those are our tools. So what you're saying, Chris, is the state and the PUC are clearly setting some guidelines for getting your tools to actually be effective. You got to sharpen your tools
exactly
to have them be effective. And that's what the state is requiring. Because if you have some lame reference to, please don't do anything that's unseen.
On Union Village Road.
Yep,
big deal.
It has nothing. It's not a useful tool. So, but scenic is clearly a broader tool than ridgeline.
But you can't, even with scenic, you have to say Van Arman Farm. You have to be specific to pass the PG test. And clear. And Steve, I totally get your point, and I'm going to bring up Upper Loveland for that very reason, that it's unfortunate that Upper Loveland Road wasn't part of the scenic inventory road. But I think, it was in the ridgeline, and to your point, I don't think it matters if it's somebody has, wealthy people are on ridgelines or not. I think it's a community effort to pick, to go around and say, what do we think that's really worth preserving in this town? Jen and Dan. Dan, go ahead. Or Jen.
Yep.
Jen.
So, hi, everybody. Yeah, this has been a really interesting discussion so far. I wanted to add one more thing in terms of, I don't know, things to consider as tools. The Upper Loveland Solar Site is also mapped in the most recent version of the town plan as a resource protection area. I don't know exactly what that means. I think that is a tool that might need sharpening, but it hasn't stopped. It has no teeth. It hasn't had any teeth. But so it's a ridgeline and it's a natural resources protection area, which, doesn't really have anything to do with the types of people or their, income that live around it. And so that is something I think that could be looked into as well. But the point that I wanted to make also, Steve said it way better than I can say it, but is in terms of economic or social justice. You know, if we have these criteria that prioritize wide open spaces and beautiful areas, the places where people who make less than the median income, which is Upper Loveland Road, that's where we're going to cite the cell towers, the energy generation plants, whatever they may be, the power lines, the throughways, and it's a way of saying, yeah, we don't think that you guys really, well, you're just not important, you know, and we're going to put our ugly stuff here. So,
I think it's an excellent point, Jen.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it's a hard one, but to say it bluntly, I guess, the if you have something that people agree is scenic or beautiful or attractive, whatever, it will be more valuable. So it will literally cost more. And so the people that can buy it will be the ones with more money. And so you will, you know, this will happen by definition, that you'll get that kind of segregation, and that you've got to be very careful about how that works, because the property values will be higher at certain kinds of land, and then the people that are on those kinds of land will have the money. I mean, it's unavoidable, but you got to be really conscious.
Good, Ernie.
Okay. Oh, well, I'm thinking sort of following up. On one hand, I'm not convinced that the market is an appropriate thing to follow anyway for this set of judgments. And you, I got to ask you, Jan, about where those 5 points come from, because I got to find them and I got to look at them myself. But not right this second.
Yeah.
Later. But the point is that what we have to strive for when we do any kind of an inventory is some way of being equitable here, and it shouldn't matter. And one of the things, and this is just a suggestion, I think though that it might help anyways, is to make sure that people of all stripes, not just people that sit at home and have plenty of leisure time, but also working people, not that there's many of them left in Norwich, and so on, are absolutely welcomed to help be part of making these decisions, so that we don't have just the kinds of places that suit one strata of the economy. I think at least fairness, the people who are least empowered should be given extremely powerful voices. And, you know, this inventorying process, as I always say, everything's political. This inventorying process will be political. People, the people who are not that blessed should be on this inventory, absolutely must be included. You know, and not just experts in it, in certain fields or anything, because we actually have in this town ways of it's not solar, but there are installations in this town for at least for the less fortunate, that are based on real close to dumps and so on, and that's what we're going to put installations for them. That is one of my reasons for having problems with that particular kind of installation.
Yeah.
Because
I just pulled that up. I think it might be useful just to step through. This is the 2000, it's the page 3 of the 2000 scenic inventories, and it talks about along public roads and highways, and then it has criteria like frequency the view is seen by the public, natural visual contrast, which is actually a good thing. Open meadows and woodlands, body of water rimmed by
Yep.
steep hillsides. So they're trying to define it. Order and harmony,
Yeah.
but balance between structures and open places. Focal point, is there a barn, a pond, whatever. Uniqueness, observation points that offer vistas, foregrounds of distant views, and then sensitivity to development, steep slopes and things. So those are that's just one of the lists at the beginning. It's not the scoring criteria in the same way, but it's related to it.
But see, where did those come from? They sound reasonable. They sound like they might pass Supreme Court muster, which, by the way, none of those people are working people. So
they said, so it's talking about Scenic Resource Committee members traveled through Norwich. So there was a publication by VNR, Vermont Scenic Landscapes, a guide for growth and protection. Vermont
okay,
Scenic.
could you repeat that, Jan?
This is it's page 2 of the Scenic.
Yeah, no, the name of that guide.
Vermont's Scenic Landscapes, a guide for growth and protection. It was adapted into a matrix system as suggested by Hanover's Scenic Locales Committee report, Something for Everyone, 1998.
Ernie, all of this was in the packet, like
the Scenic Resource Inventory. It's
Scenic
part
Resource Inventory was in the packet, and it may be that it's in like a packet from
Okay, I looked the whole packet. I'll look at it again.
not in this packet, 2 packets.
I can send you the, well, let me put it this way. I will have Pam put it on the website under our subcommittee. And
That's
then
right.
everybody can go find it, and that it's the Scenic Resources Inventory 2000. But I'm looking at the actual score sheets that are at the end, and those are the criteria. The ones I just read are the ones across the top that they ranked: frequency seen by the public, natural visual contrast, order, harmony.
Those came from, you said, from a guide that was from
yeah,
Hanover?
they reference Hanover was one of the resources, and then there was an A&R one. But clearly, I think the kinds of things we're talking about, we need to look at them again. That's kind of the point. I mean, any of these.
And I think we need to have
one was in the 80s.
And I think we need to have a good variety of people doing this, so that what Steve was talking about can at least be mitigated, if not eliminated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that Upper Loveland is exactly, Dan or Jen, to your point. It was in the ridgeline protection, but under that particular rule, the ridgeline protection is only as viewed by a certain road, and that's when Rod said you can't see the site from Upper Loveland Road, and that was it. That did it.
Well, I think he went so far as to say Upper Loveland Road is not a scenic road.
It's not a scenic. He said not a scenic road. So even though it was in the ridgeline protection, but there were no, and this is where my big beef is with that. What the town has, what they call ridgeline protection. It's in our town plan, but there's no official map. It doesn't have boundaries. It doesn't show parcel lines. It doesn't show roads. It shows nothing. It is the most amorphous, bogus map. And so that's why I've been trying to say, I think we need to encourage to have a much more defined map, parcel boundaries, roadways, and then start having people drive around and say, okay, is your roadway, again, whoever is part of the group of driving around and picking this stuff up, or many groups. It could be groups,
many groups.
It could be hundreds of groups. It could be 200. When the town of Stowe rewrote their town plan, there were over 300 people involved in their town plan, and they won an award. The town was so involved. They were so happy. It was not as acrimonious and as horrible as our town plan was. It was we did not do well with our town plan.
Right.
but there are towns that actually do get together and do these kind of things. So I think getting that ridgeline map more secure, more.
Well, just to point out, both of the maps that are in today's packet have parcel boundaries. So that the
Oh,
one
the
that
one that Pam sent.
yes,
Yeah, but she didn't say
the
the
ridgeline one that then has the kind of darker shading if it's seen by more places, also has parcel boundaries.
But she never said that that one was actually the one that was adopted.
No, that these are both, I think, were done by Two Rivers by some, these
Yeah.
are not official
Yeah.
statutory with clout.
Right. So going back to Steve's point that, again, why is Upper Loveland Road not considered one of those, those roads that's considered a scenic road? I don't know. We didn't do the original inventory that was done 20 years ago. So that's what we're trying to say is, send out 300 people and let them all decide. I'm not quite sure how it gets done.
Well,
but
and I think
that's why I want to call the alliance to
Linda's-
see how they did it.
To Linda's point, the challenge is everything can't be scenic. Everything can't be weighted as super special because then the whole thing fails. So how do you deal with that?
Well, we can't have it the way we have it now. Everything right now is open for solar development. And that's what it is absolutely because we are a preferred site. The select board can't say anything. Our hands are tied by the select board and our hands are tied to the planning commission. And so right now it's open because we have no ridgeline protection, none whatsoever. And so the state and the PUC has said, towns have more opportunity to start defining and refining what they think should be protected. And it doesn't have to be just ridgeline. And that's when it goes back to my original question, Jan, was does something have to be protected based on the road? And I don't know if we've really answered that. Does it have to be seen by a road? Is there a beautiful field that is just outside of, Union Village? Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
A good point.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm never sure. I don't spend a lot of time on this. I just want to say that I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here. This has been done before. It's been done super well by other communities. And I know that earlier this summer, I was at one of the planning commission meetings and I talked to Ernie about this. And the East Montpelier 2022 town plan is the gold standard for this kind of discussion. Please take a look at that. They have very specific language. They address every issue that you're talking about in detail, and they leave no gray areas. So please take a look at the East Montpelier Town Plan amended 2022.
I will just again to reinforce, sorry, Steve, the use, we're trying to use the website to make these things available to all equally. So I will make the point, we will have either the PDF of that town plan or a link to that town plan on the solar siting subcommittee section of the website. Same thing with the current inventory. And so those will be there in the next couple of days.
I forwarded the PDF website to the link to the website, to the PDF rather, to Ernie and the subcommittee of the planning commission that I attended. But I can send it to you as well, just to be sure. But
yep, I'm sure I can find it, but yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Great idea. Go ahead, Jen.
Just wanted to add in answer to your question of, are streets the only thing that's important when we're determining what is a scenic view? The state has a whole list of criteria that they take into account. And, for example, public parks, public town land, hiking trails, there, and it's all right in, I can send you the text it's section 9C of the Queechy test. So I think it's 9C. Don't quote me on that. I can email it to you though. And it has a whole list of these things and what you have to take, you can choose to, as a town, take into account.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, yeah, trails that, the Appalachian Trail. So it could be, you can't see it from any road, but you can see it from the Appalachian Trail. Then it clearly has clout that you can use that fact. I mean, I do think there's some, we're dealing with public issues and public resources. So there is this element of, can you see it from a public place, whether it's a trail or a road, but also all of the various criteria and things like that talk about neighbors as well as public. So there will be criteria, whether it's for the DRB to look at or the PUC to look at, that says not just can you see it from the road, but what can you see from the neighbors, from adjoining landowners. But to Bob's point, who's the audience that matters? And, a road that has twice as much traffic, does that then weight the views from that road by a factor of 2? Or, you have to think through that stuff.
So got my point. Oh, going back to what Linda said. If the new ruling, or if the PUC adopts their revisions,
the 5/100 revisions,
if you look at I think they call them blue lines or red lines, I think whatever their red lines are, what they're trying to say now is, we're not trying to stop. Everybody gets that, Vermont's trying to go solar in 2050 or whatever. We're the big green state, but the big green state kind of got decimated for the last 20 years, and so there's a lot of pushback from communities that didn't get a whole lot of say in some of this solar renewable, contracts or whatever, developments. So they've now come around and said, listen, we want communities to have more say, period. This is your opportunity. And a lot of towns across the state are reanalyzing what they want to protect. Now, that doesn't mean that the PUC is going to suddenly, well, now we can't, Norwich has put their foot down. That's not the way that they're trying to say. They're saying, here, you have an opportunity to protect. You also have an opportunity to kind of direct, look for your brown sites, look for the other sites. But what they also are emphasizing in the revision was, take a site that isn't, on either side of the curve, and look for mitigating. Look how you can mitigate it. And the term mitigating is becoming more and more important. So let's just say, for example, Jay Van Armen, to Bob's point a couple of weeks ago, Bob said, well, you don't want to take away the economic factor for someone who could make a lot of money with a solar park, right? So, if somebody wants to go before the PUC, the whole thing about a preferred site doesn't stop somebody from going before the PUC. The only thing that a preferred site does is give a developer a financial incentive. Unless the town has a clear defined signed spot that says you may not build a solar development anywhere on Main Street between address 1 and address 50. Unless there is a clearly defined, no, you cannot build it, it's not going to hit the preferred site. But let's just say somebody comes before the town and they said, you know, we want to build here, and we don't give them a preferred site letter, I'm pretty sure they can go before the PUC anyway. The preferred site, yeah, I think the preferred site is only that you
Well,
are going to
they
get
could
a
conceivably
preferential-
do it, but they get 2 or 3 cents less per kilowatt hour or something. I mean,
No,
it
no,
does.
no, but again, it was a financial incentive. Preferred sites originally started as a financial incentive to the developer. So,
Yes,
and now they're starting to say, okay, well, we don't necessarily, you know, the preferred site status thing is what's really, you know, kind of not up for debate, but it's a lot of towns are starting to say, we don't want to just hand over a blanket preferred site. There are people who are now, there's a whole petition now before the PUC from a coalition of towns who are saying they don't like the word preferred site, we support this project. And they are actually asking the PUC to remove the word support. They're saying because of the preferred site, the way it's designed, it makes it look like the community is supporting the project, when in fact they didn't have a say in it. So the PUC is now saying, go back and say, okay, so it isn't an ideal location. We really want to preserve it, but try and mitigate, try and come up with more screening, come up with ways to build around the field. Think outside the box. You know, we don't need a solar park that is just going to level 15 acres of land and have rows and rows and rows and rows. You know, mitigate, come up with alternative ways, you know, that work with the landscape, you know, pollinators. That it was that other thing that I, you know, had put in the packet at least 2 meetings ago, where they're starting to come up with ways to build a solar, I don't want to call it a solar park, a solar development that's much more, I call it symbiotic with the landscape. And it's not just, you know, these rows and rows and rows of solar arrays. And that's what they're encouraging right now. At least that's what I get the impression. Whether or not the revisions get passed or not, or all of them, I don't know. But you know, the forest fragmentation.
Do you know the timing of when? Because I
No,
thought
and I've been
closed the
watching.
hearings.
No, and I still think I don't know how long it. You know, I'm not sure what the process is. I mean, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. I have no idea. But forest fragmentation is definitely clearly a major issue. Forest fragmentation is on the top of the list. People have been complaining that, you know, we're not going to start clear cutting forests for this. You got to come up with a way to mitigate.
Yeah.
Linda?
And that's why there's a statute now requiring forest blocks, for instance, to be left intact.
Well, it hasn't passed yet, Ernie, though. That's the
No, it is. It's passed.
for
That's-
solar or any kind of
It's
bill.
different. Yeah, I don't think he's not talking about 5.100 specifically,
Oh, okay.
that 3 acre limit thing.
Okay. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. And I just wanted to let you know, that preferred site, whether it's from the definition of an old gravel pit or brownfield or roof or a town designated site, applies only to net metered projects.
Right.
So I just want you to know that, and net metered projects are up to 500 kilowatts. So it relates to a certain type of solar project,
Right.
not to all solar projects.
Right. But Linda, confirm that what I said is that accurate or not? That there's a whole step of procedure of, let's say you introduce a 500 kilowatt, you know, it says you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do a preferred site letter from a town. So there are ways you can present, but it's a financial disincentive if you don't get the preferred site, but you're not stopping somebody from putting in a facility. And if somebody actually wants to do it,
I think net metered projects of a given size, which I think basically is like from say 50 up to 500 kilowatts, have to be on a preferred site. There are various definitions, there are various types of preferred site, but they have to be on a preferred site. So preferred site can be, by definition, it's like a brownfield or a roof is a preferred site. An old gravel pit is a preferred site. The town has nothing to do with saying
Right.
that. But an open field, if you want that to be a preferred site, it has to be town designated.
I think, because I remember, Chris, at part of the Upper Loveland conversation was a statement by either Norwich Solar or their attorney or something that basically said, if we didn't get that letter, it wouldn't have gone forward. That if the planning commission and the select board back in whenever that was, 2020, hadn't given those letters, now whether that's simply Norwich Solar saying we understand the financial impact and it's not viable, but there was a pretty clear statement that said without that letter we wouldn't have gone forward.
Yeah, I still think that there is, and Linda, you might be right between the 50 and the 150, but I think if you go into a 500 kilowatt, I think people do have the right to go before the PUC, especially if it's your own land, a land that isn't visible. Well, let's go back to a piece of land that isn't visible from any road. It's not in ridgeline protection. And somebody comes up and says, okay, well, we want to put a net meter project there. I think the problem for me is because Norwich everything is a preferred site. So I'm not sure how you get out of if we were in another town, this may be a legitimate question, but because Norwich is deemed preferred site everywhere, it's a tough question to ask because there are plenty of towns that didn't designate the whole town. So if there's a field and somebody says, I want to put a net meter project and it's not in their preferred site listing, those people can go before the PUC and get their project. So I don't think that if the town doesn't give the preferred site letter, again, I think they still can go before it, but I'll check on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Linda. Sorry.
It can be confirmed. I'm trying, Linda, sorry.
And I just want to note to identify for you all the difference. A net meter project is the type of project, and of this type, it's something that, like we would use the term community solar. So it's the type of project where people who would like to do basically residential solar, but for a variety of reasons, it doesn't work on wherever they live, that there's too much shade or they're renters or something like that. So net meter projects are the only type of projects that individual householders can use. The other type of project that doesn't care about preferred sites are large utility projects where the developer has a contract with the utility or the utility is building the project itself.
Right.
So just to let you know the difference.
I just want to ask, I'm kind of mindful of the time and trying to get chunks of decisions and things thought through. So, I do think we're at a place where we could say, kind of officially request from the subcommittee that we would like to put the proposed action to reinvigorate a scenic resource inventory, ask the full planning commission to put that on the agenda. Now they may kick it back to us and say, great idea, go for it. You guys that's perfectly possible, but I
don't think that would be a great idea because this subcommittee has one specific thing. It probably belongs in land use.
Exactly. And it belongs clearly with Conservation Commission and Historic and lots of other groups. So, but I think we should concretely say, yep, we're doing that. And then the other question that I have specifically is, how do we feel about enhanced energy plan? And do we want to talk that through? Because, so I guess to address the two things that we have had on the agenda for the last two meetings, which is Ridgeline and Scenic. I think on the Ridgeline side, at the very least, we are asking for, to your point, Chris, we want better maps. We want a map that we want the definition of the ridgeline, meaning it's the highest point on the hill with 150 feet on either side, or 300, whatever it is, and then we want that implemented on a GIS format, official map that can then be adopted as the official map. So that's like the ridgeline piece.
With the roads though, because without the roads.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as it's GIS, it has all the other layers.
Right.
So you can put the wetlands on, you can put the ANR maps on it, you can put the roads, you can put the three-phase power map on it. As the instant you're a GIS layer, you get the benefits of all the other layers. And so we are specifically asking for, we're not proposing in the short term to change the definition of ridgeline or rewrite the zoning bylaws about how you have to. I mean, I read them recently. They're pretty good. I mean, they give the DRB the ability to say, hey, wait a minute, you can't just put a massive glass reflecting structure in the middle there. You got to put some trees in front. You maybe move it to the side of the property. But clearly we want clarity about just the map as a tool. And then Scenic, okay, we're proposing to wake up a resource inventory exercise. And so that's kind of concrete progress on, or proposals at least, on each of those two. So then the other two, I guess, that I would put on the table is enhanced energy plan. And should we put that on a subsequent agenda to really get concrete about whether or not we want to do it, pros and cons and how and so forth. And then the other one, which you brought up, is the preferred site default. Do we want to do anything short term about that, or does it have to be in a bigger context? Because if we just said, okay, that shouldn't be, that's causing trouble, that's too undefined, we just want to strike that line out of the town plan, we could propose that. The planning commission could get behind it or not, and then you know, do we want to take that on, or is it better in a bigger?
So John, we have to take it. We have to, because you can't, again, I still feel horrible about the Upper Loveland situation, because it's clear we don't have a map that supports the ridgeline protection, which is in the town plan. So it has to be addressed. This is why we all came to this solar siting committee, why it was developed. We have a town plan that's inaccurate. Because
so the map is one, but even the scenic is part of that as well.
It's to Jen's point. She and the other members, or anybody else who said, wait a minute, the last we knew, our parcel of land around us was in the ridgeline protection. And then everybody says, well, no, it's not. Whoops.
Well, but no, let's be clear though, because if you read the briefs, everybody agreed it was in ridgeline protection, and then they immediately said, comma, but that then kicks the scenic stuff to get involved. And
right, and then I'll take it a step further. Now we look at this map, and it's still not clear from that map. If you looked at it, what is it? It's just sort of this blob of green kind of everywhere, except the ones that that Pam just mailed out to us. I can't imagine a zoning director or ZA coming in and looking at that map. They don't know the town of Norwich at all, and we just hand them the map and say, here's our ridgeline protection. They'd be like, really? I mean, what would they say? What would somebody?
I mean, I think it's good to think of them as tools, and how do we make the tools useful for the groups and people that are going to need to use them? So for Ridgeline, it's a tool. Ridgeline and Scenic are tools that we're putting in the hands of the DRB. And so somebody proposes development, and boom, you got to look at the overlays and look at the maps and says, "Ooh, you trip this flag and this flag and this flag
Right.
for Ridgeline and Scenic, and here's what you have to care about." And then you're giving tools to the DRB, and then the DRB says, "Oh, you got to plant a tree in front of that, or you got to move the house down below, or you can't clear cut the whole property," or that's what they have for tools. So we're trying to improve the tools for the groups that are going to be using them.
Right, but what I'm saying is going back to, one of the big bullets for us was to deal with the town plan saying, we're a blanket preferred site. So, I mean, I think that was a given. It was, I think, handed down to us to figure out what it would be if we aren't a blanket plan. If we're not a blanket preferred site, then we have to rely on the ridgeline protection. And the ridgeline protection right now is just so, and we're saying the same thing, I think.
Yeah,
So
I think we are.
We have to.
Yeah. I think we want to, I'm trying to kind of chunk it into things we can work on, because these are good conversations and we're progress and we're chewing on the right things. But I'm trying to get so that we can chew, swallow, digest, and get. And so what are those? What are the next couple bites to take, and what does it look like as we digest?
This is my suggestion at this point. I really appreciate that, Steve. I've read Stowe's and I've read a couple other town plans, not extensively in specific to solar siting. I was reading about their town plans when we were in the debacle of our own town plan for a lot of other reasons. It's been a while since I have read other towns' town plans. And I think he's right. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of people, plenty of agencies that can help us out. But I do want to read East Montpelier's.
Yep.
And everybody in that area is so much more tourist related communities that they're trying to protect their resources probably a lot more than our area for a different reason. I mean, we have a beautiful area, but again, their tourism is super important. But I would really like to, before we go before the planning commission and suggest this, I would really like if we can all, Ernie, if you're willing to, if we can, I mean, can we talk about assignments? I would like to take the time to read some of those.
Yep.
Let me talk to the Alliance and see if are we going to meet in December, or is it too holiday-ish?
I think we can make, if we're doing once a month and the PC's doing once a month, then that's not too burdensome. But I agree. It's sort of like the subcommittees get assignments from the PC. We can, as individuals, get assignments from the subcommittee and promise to make progress on them, and that that's time better spent than meeting.
Well, to me, I just feel we're a little premature going to the rest of our group and saying, well, we've come up with this, and they're going to say, well, how are you going to do it? I don't think we have how are we going to do it yet. So getting some examples from the Alliance and Charlotte, and maybe, looking at East Montpelier and getting some language and seeing some much more specificity from other towns.
Yeah.
I think would be super helpful before we go back to these guys.
No, I agree. One thing I have on my list anyway, which is another town, which is Thetford. So Thetford just redid a bunch of bylaws, and I have it on the list to talk to David Forbes, who's their PC chair there. So I will certainly be doing that, because one thing I noticed just glancing at their bylaws, they have, talking about sprawl, they have a definition of, they're it's very carefully worded, a franchise business or something like that. It's specifically stated that there's this different thing if there are more than 10 of them in various states or something, so that if you try to plop a McDonald's in East Thetford, it will trip a flag because you'll meet the definition of a franchise business.
Yeah.
So they're thinking about it, and that's in an amendment in their bylaws. So I think under the heading of learning from other towns, I think that East Montpelier, Thetford's got new ones, the Charlotte, there are various examples. And everybody we talk to, we should ask for more examples. Okay, East Montpelier is great. If you talk to the East Montpelier people, ask them who they think is another good example, or what's a smaller town example of what you guys are doing. And let's get 4 or 5 really good resources that we can quote and point at and build off of.
Yeah,
good.
and I'm really not. I think you did. The preferred site is definitely, whether or not I think the rest of our group wanted us to investigate whether or not we should do an enhanced plan. So I think we need to go back to them and say, we now concur, or it's our suggestion that we should do an enhanced. I really will honestly say I was hoping that Peter Gregory or somebody was going to come in and sort of have a discussion with us. Like,
well, we could, I think we could ask that again, in terms of looking for resources, we could ask for that specific to it, and we could find one, and it may be a Thetford or a Stratford or one of our neighbors that within the last 2 or 3 years went through it and did it. And we could say, hey, can somebody from your energy committee come and tell us about that? Or Peter or somebody at Two Rivers might be the right resource. But I think getting a resource to help us with the enhanced energy plan question is definitely a good next step.
Yeah, and they don't, in our next meeting, again, because it's the holidays, it's always tough to ask somebody. Can we, by the way, Jan, this is just an administrative thing, sort of stuff, but I kind of like when the select board or regular groups, not necessarily subcommittees, at the end of the minutes, they kind of give a summary of what the next agenda is coming up, and the
I
date.
saw Marcia's definitely been keen on doing that.
And I really like that. I like seeing it. So it would give us an idea of, so people can see what's coming up. But that goes back to what we were just saying.
Right, that's what we want to do. We want, because it helps us.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure if it's necessarily fair to be asking somebody like Peter Gregory or somebody from the TROC if they would give us a half an hour or 15 minutes of just, okay, this is what you guys are going to have to, this is the kind of homework you're going to have to be looking at. This is what you need to prep for an enhanced energy plan. I just like to hear it from them, because I thought that in order to pass the enhanced energy plan, the regional planning commission has to be pretty involved in it. So
they have to approve your plan.
Yeah. So why would we bother, spinning our wheels and then have them just say, well, you guys didn't really know what you were doing. But so I'd rather have.
And I think in conversation and in reading, and I have some references, I think there's a lot of supportive material. I mean, there are literally guideline to municipalities working on enhanced energy plans, and 50 pages of questions and things you fill out and things so there are plenty of resources. And I think what I will sign up to do is dig into that stuff. I can ask Peter again, and I can ask a couple of our neighboring towns, but basically take for the written resources, take them and put them on our website. And then I can, we'll notify each other and just say, hey, there's new material on enhanced energy plans that's now linked on our website. That's your homework, people, and go through that. And then we have a meeting and talk about it.
Yeah, because I'm not quite sure, Jan, but I don't think the solar committee is going to be the one who does the enhanced energy plan. That's a planning commission thing. I mean, who actually does, I mean, without a ZA right now, who actually fills out the form and does all that stuff?
Well, I think, like I said, I mean, if for something that's enhanced energy plan, which is way more aligned with our charter, then you're right, it's perfect. Well, the planning commission is likely to bump a chunk of it back to us. And then what we would say, I would hope, is if we have a specific task like that, let's get some more townspeople involved.
Oh yeah, good idea.
And so we would say that the solar siting committee has been tasked with, chartered with a specific activity by the planning commission to work on an enhanced energy plan for Norwich. And we are asking for public participation to do that. And, to the point of a conservation commission member, an energy committee member, whatever that, whatever, make a select board. And I think Jeff's point was very useful in the question of appointing subcommittee members. And does the planning commission allowed to appoint its own subcommittee members out that aren't PC members, that are resident members? And Jeff's right. If, like, the Affordable Housing Subcommittee brought their planning grant application to the PC, and then the PC decided on it to send it to the select board. So you don't have to get picky about, oh, we anointed these 3 townspeople to be part of the activity. That doesn't make them like automatically town employees or something, that it makes a big deal out of it, because it's going to feed into the planning commission, who are going to vote on it, who are appointed members, and then go to the select board. So I think that's part of what I'm hoping for, is if we can get concrete about these activities.
Right.
We want to redo the scenic resources inventory. Who wants to participate?
Right.
We want to talk about having an enhanced energy plan. Who wants to participate? And publicize it enough to get some people to do it.
And it's a good time to do it. I mean, to me, again, I'm just kind of considering the fact that we're going into the holidays and you're going to lose, if we bring this subject up before the holidays, you're going to lose a lot of the steam going through, because then everybody kind of like, is get distracted. So to me, it's kind of like, let's get our one last meeting where we can talk to Peter Gregory, a couple other people, look at East Montpelier,
get some more
of that kind of stuff. And then by first of the year, get ready to go in front of them and say, okay, this is it. This is what we've got. And, here's some of the stuff. But
so I think I like that plan. I mean, because there are a lot of resources that we can dig up and take the time to look at them. And just on those 2, I mean, I think so. Separate out the maps for the ridgeline, and I'm working that, and we know what we need. It's not really us to do it. It's really get it done officially. I'm not going to run GIS. You're not. Somebody's going to do it for us. But scenic resource inventory and enhanced energy plan are 2 concrete proposals that, you're right, aren't quite fleshed out enough to be real proposals, but we can learn a lot in a month and a half, and be intelligent when we come back to the PC at the January meeting to go for.
So the 3 things are there actually. So I see the big topics that we're going to go into the new year with is mapping, getting a updated ridgeline protection map, the scenic resources.
Inventory.
By the
yeah.
way, inventory, where does the ridgeline include the roads, or does the scenic resources include the roads? I mean, who's
Scenic resources.
Scenic resources, scenic resources.
right?
The ridge lines are by definition, elevation defined, topography defined.
Okay, and then, so those two, the enhanced energy plan and what we want to do as far as, the preferred site status of Norwich as it is currently stated in the town plan. Those are the
So
four
I
things.
think, I think the fourth one rolls into the third one. You will have to deal with that question as part of it, because enhanced energy plan, you're gonna have to say, you have to identify enough sites to meet your quota,
Right.
or you will not get approved. And
Right.
so then you take out the default, but then you have to say enough preferred sites to potentially meet your quota, or they won't approve it. So the preferred will be a part of enhanced energy plan.
Ernie,
So I was basically going to ask a very simple and basic question. What can each one of the three of us do in preparation for that? Do we want to divvy up any particular stuff, or just, like, will you call me up eventually and say, Ernie, what do you think about blah, 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 blah? And then I'll talk to Jan and go, something like that, so it's not a meeting. Or how do you want to do this?
I'm willing, I definitely want to call the Alliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And try and do stuff like that. Ernie, and I maybe, I again, like, I've read town plans.
I mean, I've got a
Are
list.
you
of
willing to
stuff
look at
read.
East Montpelier and start looking at some of the language and that kind of extrapolate?
I was just going to say, I've written a number of things to be reading over the next from listening to people, Steve and everyone here who's and Jen and stuff. I've
Yeah.
written stuff down to read. So, and that includes the East Montpelier plan. And just as I don't want to dwell on it. Borrowing from other municipalities, borrowing from other governmental entities is a common thing when it comes to drafting regulations and everything. So I strongly endorse the idea of looking at other plans.
Yeah.
And
So-
not even necessarily just Vermont plans either.
Yeah, but so let me ask, so we're learning how to do this in terms of sharing the information and using the website. And I will talk to Pam, but my goal would be that I'll figure out with Pam whether she wants, what kind of a funnel she wants. Does she want it to come to me and then to her, or is it legitimate for, say, Ernie to say, for now, let's take it through me. Because I don't want two of us to send her the East Montpelier plan and say, stick this on the website. But I think I do want us to be very liberal about putting things up there. It should be the easiest thing in the world to say, oh, I know that I have in my files a municipality's guide to enhanced energy plans. So I want that on the website where anybody can click on it. And I will send that to Pam tomorrow and say, put this in. So I want us all to be, for now, let's feed them to me just as logistically the person interfacing with Pam. And then if we figure out, if it gets fluid enough, then we can have, people can just email them to Pam and say, hey, can you put this on the website?
Yeah, and then just stepping it one more step farther is that, Ernie, if you, again, we're really only directing this, although take that back, we're trying to keep this solar oriented, pun intended, but to Linda's point is that it doesn't matter. If you do baseline protection, it's development either way. But anyway, Ernie, if you find any pages that you think are particularly relevant and you want to put it in the packet. I mean, I don't think we should put, for our next meeting, I don't think we should put the whole town plan in the
No, and
packet.
that's,
But
yeah,
if you
that's.
find
But
relevant
the thing
pages.
is I have looked in, you know, when we were doing the present town plan and stuff like that. I mean, I hunted down sources of information that other people just never thought of or didn't use, didn't want to use in some cases, for political reasons, and stuff like that. But the point is that, you know, I have no problem, and I like this idea of using the town website as a repository for these things. And I also
Yeah.
like sort of having Jan as the sort of the administrator of it.
gatekeeper. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I still want to see, Ernie, rather than reading the whole town plan, what I'm saying is that if your assignment was to read it,
I can
If
make
you can
notes
just-
if that's what you're saying.
well, no. Actually, if you can just, I'm sure there's a place, I'm sure like our town plan, they probably have a chapter on renewables. So if you can, and you think it's relevant, Pam can actually, I've asked Pam to do it, or if you can just send her.
yeah, you can
Yeah,
pluck out pages.
just that, and then highlight things that you thought that were important.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
I
can
mean,
do
I'm,
that.
it's, I'm gonna probably read it anyway, just because I'm gonna do
Yeah,
it.
I mean, we will,
Yeah,
but
that's
but
what
the
you,
packet,
that's you. Yeah, we know that, Chris. We know.
the packet, but the packet emphasizes it for other people as well, for people who are looking at the agenda and they're saying, oh,
Exactly. Yeah.
so it is important, but I also want to encourage people, and we should start putting it at the bottom of the agenda, or maybe when we have the indexed packet, that there may be longer things that at the bottom of the agenda, it says reference material, and it points you to the website. So you have the really, really pertinent to the specific agenda item material in the packet. And then you have broader, hey, do you want to dive deeper into this? Go to the website, and you'll find all these other things.
Okay. So
I also want to, I just want to say one other thing, and I like doing this. This is kind of a personal foible. But one of the things is that this whole, by using the website as sort of the place where we put all this stuff in to make it available, I like the idea that this makes this information public and available to everyone equally. So
Right.
it becomes sort of an equitable, an exercise in equitability again. I like that about doing it this way. And I think it might get other people it might even spur other people to make comments and stuff too, who otherwise might feel disenfranchised. And again, this approach that you're doing here, because eventually I can see other people who, like, let's say, come to this committee meeting might say, hey, I read this, and I saw this, Jen was making some kinds of comments, something like that. And it's like, yeah, let's include that too. I mean, it's not just,
Yeah.
I just think this is a positive step. And it's an improvement over what we've been seeing for the past 15 years.
no, and you also don't have to chase documents down by going through every packet.
Well, there's that too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Linda, go ahead.
Well, it'll take us some time to get it worked out. But I do think it's a very important tool.
Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. And before, I sense that you're wrapping up, and before you go, I just want to make a correction to something that I said, which is that I was wrong in saying that every net meter project had to be on a preferred site. So between 15 and 500, it could be on a regular site.
Yeah.
The project would have to have an additional reduction in the net meter, the value of the net meter credits. But so it is possible. I sent you 3 committee members a citation on that, but I just wanted to say that for everybody, just to make that correction.
No, I was pretty sure that
Okay.
that was the case. It's a
Yeah.
financial
it's-
disincentive.
Yeah, and it's fairly substantial. I mean, even if it's a couple cents a kilowatt hour, that's a big deal to somebody who's doing the math.
So
on a-
anyway, before we get
okay.
distracted on that, so so you're gonna start in the minutes, start adding, and thank you again for taking the minutes. You're gonna start adding the proposed or, agenda items coming up at the next.
Right.
Ernie's gonna read East Montpelier. I'm gonna call the Alliance, the Greenbelt Alliance. And you are going to talk to Peter Gregory. Now, have we come up with again, because we've got a holiday sensitivity, and I don't know when our next planning commission meeting is,
The
but if we're
12th.
gonna meet Tuesday,
We're meeting the 12th. So the 19th of December is
it's really
pretty,
cutting it.
that's a
pretty-
little hairy.
Just inviting somebody from outside to join our meeting seems.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I
So
think
can we make it earlier and do it like December, the week
The
before?
the 5th,
Is there any reason not to make it December 5th?
2, 3, that's 3 weeks from tonight.
I mean, do we care?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think it just depends how much homework we do before and after. I think there's a fair bit of written stuff that we can throw out and use. So, but I think we just say we're gonna do it on the 5th and we'll get done what we get done, but.
So do we have to call it, do we have to call it, I mean, I'm a little. Is it a regular meeting if we meet every,
No, I
Tuesday.
think the subcommittees are all specials. There's no, it's not until we really hit a stride where we say we always do the 4th Tuesday or something, then I think we just call
and
them.
I
all-
didn't call this one a special because we've been meeting on Tuesdays.
I think if you call them a special, it just means you have 24 hours or 48 instead of 5 days, but
Right.
I think we can be flexible in the day we meet as long
Yeah,
as
we
it's gonna be warned. So
Okay,
you want to say the 5th?
let's just say the 5th and see if you can get Peter Gregory to give us 15 minutes, give us a quick rundown. Ernie, if you can
It
give
may
us some.
be, I mean, I'll try that. It may very well be that there are other resources or
Oh, yeah,
he
no, I didn't
he
mean that.
he can give me a lowdown that takes me 15 minutes to run through, but we don't need him there to do it. But we want at that meeting to have some quite solid resources and questions answered about doing an enhanced energy plan.
I mean, I
Yeah.
just like the idea of the powers that be who's going to approve this
Yes,
would be, on a Zoom call with us and say, this is what we're gonna, this is where you guys got to really focus.
and he may have somebody either at Two Rivers or he may have
Exactly.
somebody. It's like, oh, this person in Stratford just eats this stuff up, loves it, and has done
right,
helped 3 towns do it. Fine, then we'll look for that. So
And I
I'll
think but didn't the Upper Valley lose its energy coordinator, which we were all supposed to pay into, or did that
I'm
go
not
down
sure.
the tank?
I'm not sure, but I have enough to summarize that. If we're saying the 5th, I guess I
Okay,
need to turn into a pumpkin pretty soon.
I know.
here.
Well, but do we want to just, does the last thing we have is the minutes? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes of October?
I wrote them. I thought they were brilliant. So I would
moved to
second
approve
that.
Minutes of October 17th.
In the spirit of collegiality, I'll agree with him.
All right, that's all 3 of us, I think. So
Any other comments? Jen, Steve, anybody? Dan? All right, so our next meeting is Tuesday, December 5th, and you have sort of whatever, we'll see it in the minutes, what we're gonna talk about, and we have
Yep.
our assignments. Wow.
Yep, exactly. That's great.
All right,
Right, everybody.
I guess meeting adjourned at 8:41, whatever.
8:40. Oh yeah, I gotta write that down. All right.
All
Good
right,
night,
thank you.
And happy Thanksgiving to everybody. We'll see you after the first big holiday.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you,
All right,
guys.
everybody.
Appreciate it.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.